Always once a year here on the show, we like to feature Tom Withers, who is the Associated Press writer for the Cleveland Market. You don't read his stuff unless you go on the internet. I explain this every time Tom comes on the show because I think it's a necessity to do so. We get stories from around the country in your newspaper or on the internet, and we on the air use those stories from Tom's colleagues with Associated Press that are assigned to cover San Francisco, Dallas, St. Louis, New York, etc. Tom's assignment is Cleveland. His stuff feeds all over the country to the various markets, and it's exhausting telling your story and stature every time you come on, my
Bruce,
friend.
Always good to see you. Usually we're under the Arizona sunshine when we do something like this, so good to see you again.
Yes, yeah. Well, you stay under these lights long enough. Tom, I want to talk about the Francona signing yesterday, but before we do, was it you on Friday, I believe, that Shurmur lost his cool and threw a few F-bombs when you pressed him about why Richardson wasn't at practice?
Well, Friday was an interesting day there, to say the least, Bruce. We got to practice. The media is only allowed to see, I don't know if people realize this, we're only allowed to see the first 15 minutes of practice. So when we showed up and the practice was moved inside on Friday because it was raining, and we got into the field house, and Trent Richardson was not on the field. There are several people in the media. Nate Ulrich is kind of our ringleader on this from the Akron Beacon Journal. We tend to go right down the roster to make sure everybody is, we take a little roll call, if you will. So that morning, Trent Richardson wasn't there. And it doesn't take you long to figure out, he's one of the first 2 or 3 people you're looking for out there. So anyway, he wasn't on the field. And so I had asked a couple of the media relations staff, where's Trent Richardson? They didn't have an answer for us. And they said Coach Shurmur would address this after practice. So, in this day and age where instantaneous news, and that's always my job anyway with the AP. We got to get things out as quickly as we can. Now, if the star running back is not at practice, I have to report that, particularly when the team is not telling me why he is absent.
Sure.
So we left after the 15 minutes. I'll try to make this as short as I can. We went in. Everybody filed something saying, Brown star running back Trent Richardson is not at practice today. The team does not have a reason. Pat Shurmur will address this after the practice. So subsequently, a few of us found out that his girlfriend was pregnant, she was in labor, what have you. So when we later got into the practice, Coach Shurmur would only say that he was missing because of personal reasons, it was not injury related, and this would not affect his game status for Sunday. Fine. Well, I pushed it a little bit in that I wanted to have someone on the record say why Trent Richardson was missing practice. I didn't think that was asking a lot.
No.
And it's kind of my job. So Pat then talked to us a bit off the record about some things, and then he finally went back on the record, told us that, yes, indeed, Trent Richardson was missing because his girlfriend was in labor, and that he would be playing on Sunday, and proceeded to storm away. I felt bad about it. It was not my intention to push Pat to that point, but I felt it was my job to find out the news. So it was unfortunate. Things like that happen. Bruce, you've been in this business long enough that you know that people can get
This is what I don't understand. This is what I do not understand. This is not Secret Service work.
Right.
How easy is it for through the PR department or Shurmur himself saying, hey, listen, you guys probably noticed that Richardson wasn't here today. You may or may not know his girlfriend's in labor and they're going to have a baby, and we advocate, and he wanted to be with her, and we advocate that he be with her, and it's a wonderful,
it's a non-issue.
It's a feel-good
it's something
story,
to be celebrated.
But to be it's top secret. It's just stupid.
Yeah. I think we all felt, to your point, that it all could have been avoided. That this could have easily been addressed at the beginning of practice, much to what you just said. Hey, here's where Trent is. Everything's fine. She's doing well, whatever the case may be. It wasn't handled well, and unfortunately, it's kind of.
Why do the Browns have this type of an attitude with the media?
Well,
it's just so. I mean, is it the NFL thing, the aura of the NFL, the way the whole NFL is?
I think it is.
Because the Indians aren't like that, nor are the Cavs.
I think there is something to that being the NFL, Bruce, I think there's a strategy, we can't let out any of our secrets no matter what they are or how minuscule they seem to the public. They want to keep everything within quarters, and I think there's something to be said for that. However, there are circumstances, much like this one, where again, it could have all been avoided. So
that's really going to affect our strategy going into the next game against Cincinnati.
Well, fortunately,
or the Giants.
Fortunately, the baby's fine. Mommy's doing fine.
And congratulations
and Trent
to
Richardson played well on Sunday.
Now, I understand that Coach Sam was on one of the radio stations and said something critical. I don't know what it was. I don't really care. But I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Shurmur sought out Coach Sam.
Now, I don't know that.
Okay.
I know, I see Sam every Monday. He's part of the press corps that usually attends Coach Shurmur's news conferences. So I don't know that particular story. But, there's been, let's be honest, Bruce, with the way things have gone now, with them being 0-5 during an 11-game losing streak, everybody's a little bit sensitive, and I think at this point, Coach Shurmur is feeling the heat.
Well, Tony Grossi wrote this, that Shurmur has confronted a former Browns coach for critical comments that he made on a local radio show. The other thing is obviously yesterday, and this also involves our colleague Tony Grossi pressing Coach Shurmur on the why Richardson was not on the field for the 3rd-and-1 play, which with a 17-10 lead in the second quarter, and it turned out to be a momentum changer.
Sure was.
The interception, of course. I was astonished through our sources to hear, and you were in that locker room. After the press conference, the media goes to the locker room, as I explained earlier at the beginning of the show. Tom, you were there. Everybody was surrounding Hayden, first day back and all. And apparently Shurmur came into the locker room seeking out Tony to inform him. He felt obligated, I guess, to inform Tony that Richardson was in on 10 of the 13 third-down situations.
He was in the locker room. I was talking to Joe Hayden at the time when I saw Coach Shurmur come back into the locker room. So, again, Bruce, I think, right now everybody is, in that building, on pins and needles a little bit. Since Mr. Haslam announced that he was buying the team from Randy Lerner, I think there's been kind of this undercurrent in Berea of people knowing that, they're not certain what their futures are going to be. So with that, and you and I have been in that situation before where you're not sure if you're going to be able to hold on to your job or whatever the case may be. I think people are, again, very sensitive.
His demeanor at the press conference yesterday was the worst since he has been the head coach. I mean, he was edgy, testy, scrutinizing every syllable asked by the media, every choice of vocabulary, and jumping on it the slightest. And that doesn't bode well for him.
No, it probably doesn't. By the same token, I kind of like that fight in people. While it may come across as adversarial or whatever, this is a man who's very passionate about his job, who wants to do a good job. There's no way that Pat Shurmur is happy about 0-5 or 11-game losing streak or whatever else is going on out there. So I like that spirit in him. A lot of the players that I've talked to like that about Pat. They like that he shows fire. He may, sometimes he may not do it in the right way. It would probably serve him well to take some mentoring from whether it be Mike Holmgren or whomever on maybe how to conduct himself a little bit differently with the media. But there's some of that fire that I think is good.
Haslam made the statement a couple of weeks ago that he's just going to, when he gets the keys, and he gets the keys next week. When he gets the keys, that he is, just going to evaluate and everything. But I don't know if he can. If the Browns lose, this is a winnable game against Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. They're not the second coming of the undefeated Dolphins of Don Shula now. And this is a winnable game, and certainly the following week against another rookie quarterback by the name of Luck. If he loses both those games, doesn't Haslam have to?
Bruce, I don't know. I've kind of wrestled with this. There's part of me that would like to see, for once, some patience exhibited out there. Let's see things through. I think people forget, and listen, rightfully so, Pat should be criticized for some of what's transpired here in his 2 years on the job. All that said, let's not forget what he had to deal with last year, with the lockout taking away the entire preseason. Okay, shift then to and all that happened because of that. Now shift ahead to this year, where you've been handed the youngest roster in the NFL, a rookie quarterback, a rookie running back, a rookie right tackle. You have basically 3 of your top 5 defensive players missing. Gokong's out for the season. Taylor's out. You lose Joe Hayden because of a suspension. I mean, this guy's been handed a lot in 2 years, Bruce. So while I think people look at the record and say, oh my gosh, 0-7, how can this guy continue? I would hope, and I think Jimmy Haslam is a smart enough businessman to come in and say, what do I have here? You don't want to come walking in, throwing hand grenades around and just blowing the thing up. That's why we are where we are right now, Bruce. That's been the MO for the last 13 years. Isn't it time maybe to take a step back, much like Holmgren did, and I know he would now, and he now regrets that giving Mangini that extra year. I think he wishes he would have been a little quicker to the trigger and gotten rid of all that when it happened. But I think Jimmy Haslam,
despite the fact that Mangini won those last 4 games.
Last 4 games. Let's not forget. I think people forget. Everybody forgets how bad this was in 2009. This was a 1-11 team after 12 weeks, with the one win being a 6-3 victory over the Bills.
Oh,
it was
horrible
awful
in the blizzard. Yeah,
it was awful, right? So, again, I think Jimmy Haslam will come in. He obviously has a good rapport with most of the Eagles people that are here. He has a relationship with Joe Banner, who has been rumored to be coming in at some point, whether to be the CEO or whether to take over Mr. Holmgren's position. So I think Haslam he's starting to get a good sense of what he has to work with. And I just don't think it does anybody any good, Bruce, to come in here after week 7, fire the coach, and start all over. In talking to players, and that's what I try to do when I have the open period in the locker room, in talking to them, a few of the guys that have signed over here in the last couple of years as free agents have told me, when you're a free agent, the one thing you are looking for is stability. For the most part, you want to go to a place where not only they're on track to winning, but there's some sustained, whether it's the coaching staff or players, there's not continual upheaval on the roster. You want to see something is working. So if all of a sudden you're going to come in here and change things overnight, again, you're going to be right back to where we were.
The problem is, though, and in fairness to Colt McCoy, too, and certainly Whedon, these guys were forced into this West Coast offense. They're spread quarterbacks from college. It makes their assignment a lot more difficult, and especially in Whedon's case at his age.
No, I'm with you.
Despite the fact that he's a rookie.
No, I'm with you. And I think we forget that as well. And I think we forget that this team is 5 games into a season with all the things that I mentioned before, having injuries, missing Joe Hayden for those 4 games, Bruce. I don't think people can appreciate the trickle-down effect that had in that defense. It changed every single position on that field.
Right.
You went against good wide receivers who had field days against the Browns, quarterbacks who could just look on one side of the field and throw it there. You had young guys playing out of position that weren't ready. So on top of that, look at the 5 games they've played to this point. I mean, people were upset on Sunday, and rightfully so, when you get out to a 14-0 lead and it falls apart as quickly as it did. Let's not forget, those are the defending Super Bowl champions they played. Mm-hmm. And let's not also forget that in their first 5 games, 4 of those teams made the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
So while 0-5 looks bad, I'm looking at the glass half full still here as well, because I've looked at this season since the outset, Bruce, through the prism of progress. And I know people don't want to hear that. I get it. I sound like Pat Shermer now with I get it. But I think
we're competing.
I do think, though,
we're battling.
I do think progress is being made, and I think progress is being made at very vital positions.
I do too. I mean, we've all seen the progress made by Whedon. I don't think Colt makes that pass, that completion, unless he's a javelin thrower in the Olympics and he's got momentum running up.
The one to Gordon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there's many quarterbacks in the league that make that throw.
Beautiful, beautiful throw. It's a given. Richardson is a dandy, etc. I said this was the most significant hire of the 3 professional teams in this regard. Francona's got 2 world championships. Silas didn't have any as a coach. Even Lenny Wilkens had only 1. He made it 2 years in a row with Seattle, but had only the 1.
Right.
And Byron Scott made it 2 years with New Jersey, but didn't win one. Paul Brown founded I'm talking about a hire.
That's pretty profound, but I tell you what, you could argue that pretty strongly. I think, Bruce, as many times as we've seen coaching changes in this town, it seems like every time then that one of the three teams has to pick from the talent pool, they rarely get the biggest fish available, do they? This time they might have got the biggest fish. I mean, it'd be a very short list right now if you were looking for managers who are available to the Indians to pick out a guy with the qualifications, like you said, or a resume with 2 World Series championships on it. So I was really impressed with Francona yesterday. He obviously seems re-energized from having the year off. I think the chance for him to work as a baseball broadcaster maybe gave him a different eye on the game, if you will.
And I thought he was excellent. I enjoyed his color analysis on Sunday night
do a good
so
job.
much. Especially, of course, he was following Valentine, who was a buffoon, but...
Yeah, but I was really very pleased yesterday with the way that thing went as far as the Indians and their fans are concerned. I don't think you could do better for this team at this time than Terry Francona.
I do not recall. Is it unprecedented? I don't recall this so-called out clause with Antonetti and Shapiro ever before with any managerial or coaching sign contract.
And obviously the team doesn't want to talk about that. But I can see from the standpoint of how close those 3 guys are. They are good friends. It is because of Chris Antonetti and Mark Shapiro.
He didn't even mention the Dolans. I mean, he just said, I'm here because of Mark and Chris.
After his dad, I think they were the first 2 names he mentioned, or he may have mentioned them before his dad even, that they were the 2 main reasons that he came to the Indians. So I can see why he would do that because, they are all aligned on the way in. And I thought he was good yesterday, Bruce, in talking about, even though we're very close, there are going to be arguments. And that's going to be a good, healthy thing if we're going to do what's best for the team going forward.
It doesn't mean a thing, though, if we don't improve the product on the field. How do we do that? I'm sure you've looked at the free agent list. I've got it right here, Tom.
Yeah.
I've gone through each position with the fans numerous times. It's an old folks' home, and it's weak. I mean, except for a few guys, the Napolis, the
current class. I
Hamiltons,
agree with you 100%. Which is why I think it was interesting last week, Bruce, when Chris Antonetti said, you know what, our talent is much better than our record. Now, no one, and I wasn't here in August. I was lucky enough to be over at the Olympics during the 11-game losing streak that turned into whatever it was, a 5-24 August, right? No one can really explain what happened there. But I do think there are enough pieces. Now, granted, you got to go out and get a bat. You got to go out and get a left fielder, right? You've got to fix this pitching staff somehow. The strength of your team is probably still your bullpen.
Absolutely.
I would probably continue to hold on to that.
I'd keep Perez.
I would too. For a number of reasons, not the least of which is that good teams don't need closers. So if you put him out on the market, I'm not sure what you're going to get in return. And not only that,
said that all along.
And listen, and hey, can Chris be criticized for the way maybe he delivered his message many times? Yeah, but much like I said about Shermer earlier,
I like his fire.
I do.
Though.
I was just going to say that. I like his fire as well. The guy wants to win. There's nothing wrong with that. I thought it was interesting though that kind of the shots that he took at Maniac on the way out the door were a little bit unfair.
Right.
That's
was
why
a good guy.
He was a good guy.
He was a good guy.
But I do think that's what Francona is going to be so good at, is that connection in the clubhouse that the Indians were missing this year. I don't think people are aware that, this year in the Indians clubhouse, they built an office around the coaches area, which they never had before. And that, at least when the wall was not there was at least that interaction between coaches and players you didn't have this year. Everybody was kind of in their own little compartment. Then the other problem they had this year, Bruce, obviously, and I talked to Antonetti about this last week, was that this team has really been devoid of players who are leaders over the last couple of years.
Right.
They've got kids that are emerging into those type of roles. I think Michael Brantley can be a leader. I think Jason Kipnis can be a leader.
Right.
I think Chris Perez can be a leader if he channels maybe his energy in a different direction.
Right,
Wouldn't you agree?
Right.
But you have guys like Grady Sizemore who they thought might be able to lead. You can't lead if you're not playing.
Yeah.
Same with Travis Hafner. And it's tough for a pitcher to take on that kind of role when you're only playing once every 5 days. So I think the Francona hire, as much as anything else, is going to create, a connectivity, if you will, between the clubhouse and the manager's office.
Even though he said he doesn't have any desire to be the general manager or the owner, I have to assume behind closed doors that he's going to be able to go to Chris and to Mark and say, hey, you got to get me a right-handed
Give me some
stick.
help. Well, that's why I asked him that yesterday. I mean, obviously, he's going to be dealing with a payroll of about, $130 million less than he enjoyed in Boston.
Right.
But I think, what they need is that young group that we've talked about. The one right up the middle. Kipnis, Cabrera, Brantley, Santana. You need those guys to get their games going. They need to play at a higher level than they did this year. And then you got to plug in some other parts. Chisenhall. You need a kid like that to stay healthy, get on the field, get some at bats. You need Kochman, who was a nice signing, except he didn't hit the way you thought he would. He was tremendous defensively. So I do think the Indians were not a 68. They should have been a much better than a 68 win team. I thought they were a 500 team this year, and that's something to build upon.
I think that Francona will also help if indeed there is a free agent. Our record in Cleveland is atrocious. Even when LeBron James was on the Cavaliers, free agents don't want to come to Cleveland.
Well,
there's this image of Cleveland. Francona may influence a guy that's teetering, or he might have influence.
I would agree with you. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about stability. Free agents want to go to a place that it looks like the team is going to win. When you think about free agents, a lot of those guys are, if not halfway through their careers, even further along, right? So they want to win. So they want to go to a place that's going to win now. A place where there's a manager or a coach or a front office in place that has some kind of a plan going forward. So if you're going to continue, whether it's the Cavs or the Browns or the Indians, if you're going to continue to move pieces around, you're not going to be able to lure those free agents.
Would you exercise Jimenez's option?
I think you have to.
That's what I said.
Don't you? I mean,
you got nothing to show for the trade otherwise.
No.
And above and beyond that, I think we owe it to Jimenez, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the fans to find out this guy is not the same pitcher that he was with Colorado. I don't know why he isn't.
I don't know either. But there have been flashes, haven't there?
Yeah.
And let's not forget, too, he came here for 2 months in 2011, right? And then was here a complete season. Now, again, I don't know what happened this past season. I don't know why it collapsed as badly as it did. So